You're watching ECW Live. I'm John Singley, your host, and I want to welcome the most engaged citizens in Florida to our show today. We're continuing our series on the hidden lakes, the Bayou Chico watershed, and we've invited the president of the Bayou Chico Association to come in and talk a little bit more about it with us, Mr. John Nabors. John, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For those of us who haven't met you before, previously, tell us a little bit about yourself, John.
I moved to Pensacola about 19 years ago from Atlanta, and when I was in Atlanta, I actually had a engineering firm that I sold to a public company, ran it a couple of years, and thought it would be a cool idea to move to Florida and buy a marina, since I was a lifelong boater, been boating since I was a little kid, grew up on the water, so I thought it'd be a great idea to go buy a marina, which as it turns out, it's like a golfer buying a golf course. It sounds like a great idea, but not necessarily the best. Anyway, when I bought the marina, it was named the Bayou Chico Marina, and now I've renamed it Island Cove Marina, or actually I did 19 years ago, and since then I've also acquired two other marinas, which Palm Harbor Marina and Yacht Harbor Marina, which are all on Bayou Chico. So that's what I do professionally for my real job, and I have been with the Bayou Chico Association for almost 19 years, about 18 years. And back then, actually, I was also, for several years, the chairman of the state of Florida's Clean Boating Partnership, and did a lot of work in clean marinas out of Tallahassee, and very active in that for many, many years, and kind of got out of that. And I've been the president of the Bayou Chico Association now for about 12 or 13 years, I believe. So I've been doing it for a while, and I wanted to just go through and give you guys kind of a brief history of the bayou itself, and kind of a little very quick historical overview of it, and then tell you what we're doing, what we've done in the past, and what we're currently working on, and what we hope to accomplish in the near future.
John, you brought some pictures to show us here. Let's take a look at them.
Okay. This is an aerial photograph of Bayou Chico. I believe it's 1959, and the Bayou Chico Association has been around since 1959. We're celebrating our 60th anniversary this year, so the association's been at it a long time. The unique thing about our association is it's a partnership between the residents that live on the bayou and in the bayou watershed, as well as the businesses that are in the area, and boaters that just have boats that they keep on Bayou Chico. So it's kind of it's not like your normal homeowners association where we get together and talk about speed bumps and stop signs and, this house was robbed and what about this and what about that. We don't talk about any of that. The only thing we talk about is the environment, the water quality of Bayou Chico itself, and what to do to improve it, and then eventually, hopefully, maintain a good water quality. And we were working on that a long time. This is a picture of the Mahogany Mill. It's on Mahogany Mill Road on the Escambia County side of Bayou Chico. And back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they actually brought in mahogany logs from South America on tall ships, and they sailed into Pensacola to Palafox, and they would roll these logs off the side of the ships into the water. They'd put them together with cables. They'd bring in tugboats and raft them up, and then they would bring the rafts into the bayou. When they brought them into the bayou, they'd float them there for a certain period of time, and then they'd start lifting them out and putting them in the old kiln building, which is now condominiums on Bayou Chico, and they would heat them up and dry them out. Then they'd take them out and they'd run them through the sawmill and put them into board foot, and then they'd put them on trains and send them off all over. They did more than just mahogany. There was mahogany, there was slow growth pine was brought in, a lot of cedar was brought in. The early years were mahogany from South America. The later years in the 50s, 60s, and 70s was more of the pine and the cedar. So that was a mahogany mill. This is the old Bayou Chico Drawbridge, and this is, I believe, in the 1920s, 1930s, and it was also a railroad trestle, and that's how you got across Bayou Chico. It was around, this is one of the original ones. The later one, I think they took out in 1995 when they built the Bayou Chico High-Rise Bridge. They took the old drawbridge out. I'm sure a lot of old Pensacolians remember the old drawbridge. And this is another shot of the entrance of Bayou Chico back in, I believe it's in the 30s. And you can see the train trestle and the bridge there. One of the things that Bayou Chico has always been a commercial type of bayou. Unlike Bayou Tahar, which has primarily always been residential, Bayou Chico has primarily always been commercial. They've been building ships there. There's different treatment plants. The Navy actually took old pine trees and made turpentine back in the 1800s for sailing ships. They used a lot of turpentine back in those days on the wooden ships, and they actually processed the turpentine on the shores of Bayou Chico. In fact, the old pulp from the turpentine processing they used to just dump out in the middle of the bayou and let it sink to the bottom. And that was in the 1800s. This is a picture that shows one of the Liberty ships that was being built, and Liberty ships were built for World War II and World War I on Bayou Chico. And that's at the Pensacola Shipyard, which is still there, and Patty Shipyard still builds ships today on Bayou Chico. So there's a lot of commercial activity that's always been around in the bayou. This is a picture of one of my marinas after Hurricane Ivan in 2004. And it was called a Mahogany Mill Marina, but today it is called Palm Harbor Marina, and it's been rebuilt. But even as protected as Bayou Chico is from storms, Hurricane Ivan did a pretty good amount of damage everywhere, and I'm sure folks that were here certainly remember Ivan. And that's another shot of it there. It was an old Vic's Dock wooden marina, and that was destroyed. Island Cove Marina, which is further up the bayou, had less damage to it. It actually survived. Here we are rebuilding the marina, and I'm putting in 70-foot long concrete pilings, 16 inches in diameter. And the reason that we're putting a 70-foot piling into 6 foot, 7 foot of water is because over the years, Bayou Chico, back in the 1700s and early 1800s, it was very pristine, clear body water, had sugar sand on the entire bottom, and you could see through the clear water quite deep down. They said up to 15, 20 feet you could see the bottom of the bayou. It was crystal clear water, fed by natural springs that were up the head of the bayou waters. And in fact, Villa de Luna used to send his longboats up there to get barrels of water for the tall ships that were in Pensacola Harbor, and that's where they got all their fresh water. If you go back to that one again. So the piling being 70 feet, the sediment has since, over the years, last 100, 200 years, has filled in the bottom. And where this marina is, there's actually 22 feet of sediment at the bottom above the sand and below the water. So in order to get enough holding power on the pilings, we had to go through the 22 feet of sediment to get into the hard sand so that it would handle. This marina was built to withstand a Category 3 hurricane, so we had to get a little stronger grip than on a bunch of mud. It's 22 feet of mud at the bottom, but okay. In 2008, kind of a long story, and I won't bog us down too much with the dredging, but the Army Corps of Engineers dredged Bayou Chico Channel. And that channel started out in the bay, went past the yacht club, Pensacola Yacht Club, went all the way up to Patty's Shipyard and the Turn Basin and dredged that out. That's a picture of the dredge that was used at the time. And that dredge pumped enough water in 1 minute to fill 5 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So to give you some idea of the amount of water that was sent through the pipes. The sediment from the bottom when the dredging was sent up to the Jackson Creek and over Weir and into the Clark sand pits and was dewatered in the sand pits, and that was completed, I believe, the end of 2008. We started in 2008. I think we finished in 1 year. 140,000 cubic yards of material were moved up there. That's a picture of the cutter head. And that sucker spins around, goes down the bottom, and it's like a giant vacuum cleaner. It just spins and cuts loose the mud and then sucks it up into the dredge and pumps it. And when we got out to the bay, it actually pumped 2.5 miles up to the Clark sand pit, to give you an idea of the distance that we pumped the sediment. I say we, Army Corps Engineers, and that was Great Lakes Dredging that actually did that particular project. And now this is more today. This is Skanska. They have a piece of property. There's 83 acres, I believe, that's owned by the Long family. It's the Pensacola Shipyard. This is the east property by Daybreak Marina, and Skanska rented that property as well as the old Runyon Shipyard property, which is another 10 acres over there. I think they have about 20 acres at that side, east property, and that's where they're building all the beams and pilings are all manufactured there for the Pensacola Bay Bridge. So that's where all those beams and concrete pilings come from. They're made on Bayou Chico, and they're brought over there by barge and then driven into the ground, and it's assembled.
John, you say that Bayou Chico actually belongs to both the county and the city.
That's correct. That particular spot is on the city side. About 1/3 of the shores of Bayou Chico are in the city of Pensacola. 2/3 of the shores on the west side are in the Escambia County. So the Bayou Chico Bridge comes over from the city to the county. When you leave the city, you land in the county when you get to the other side of the bridge, and of course vice versa. So most of the shoreline is in the county. However, like I said, it's 2/3 to 1/3.
Right.
And Skanska is all in the city, all of their
So you got some more pictures here to share with us?
I do.
Yeah.
This is a picture of some of the areas that have been silted in over the years, and one of the things in the water quality is we're trying to get the flow better in the bayou to get fresh water in and out with the tides, and so some of it's filled in. So our current project, which we'll get into a little further here shortly, is all about dredging out and getting rid of that sediment that we had to put the piling in the 22 feet of sediment, and some of that out. And I can go ahead and start talking about that a little bit. Bayou Chico has been on what's called the 303D list, which is an impaired body of water list that's held by the federal government. We have been on that list since 1971. We've never been off the list. We are been on the list longer than any other body of water in the United States. That particular list is for impaired bodies of water, polluted bodies of water. So they only started keeping records in 1971. 1972 is when the Clean Water Act was passed by Congress, and we were on that list. And the Clean Water Act and the 303D list are part and parcel. They're all part of the same bill. And so we were one of the ones on that list that actually started and helped move the Clean Water Act forward back in the early 70s. So we've been on there a long, long time. We're still on it now, unfortunately, but we've been working to rectify that situation and get us off the list. And the reason that we're having some success right now in moving toward that end is because several years ago, it's been now about 5 or 6 years ago, we didn't even know we were involved with a federal lawsuit. There were 3 big environmental groups, I don't have their names here now, but they sued the federal government to have bodies of water removed from the 303D list. It's against federal law for a body of water to be on the 303D list for more than 10 years. Well, we've been on it since 1971, so that's what, 48 years I think we're at now. So we've been on it a long, long time, obviously more than 10 years. So the lawsuit went around and around, and the federal judge ruled that Bayou Chico, along with some other bodies of water, needed to come off the 303D list. Once that happened, the EPA, which is the federal government's environmental protection agency, had to somehow do something to get Bayou Chico off the list because it was a court order. The pecking order to that is EPA is federal. The federal government goes to the state, and they go to the Department of Environmental Protection, which is a state agency. So the EPA is the federal agency. DEP is the state agency. So the way it works is the EPA goes to DEP, and they say, okay, now you got to get this thing off the 303D list. How are we going to do that? And that's when the DEP says, okay, well, we'll put together a plan. And the plan is called a Basin Management Action Plan, which is referred to as a BMAP. The BMAP was formed, and we had 5 years to get Bayou Chico off the 303D list, or else, which I'm not sure what or else is, because I think we're in the 7th year now. But so we've been working, and the BMAP is really an interesting process. What it does is it gets all the stakeholders and everyone involved in the water quality of Bayou Chico, and we get all together in meetings in a room, and everybody talks about what they've done to help water quality. So some of the partners, for instance, of course, the Bayou Chico Association, were one of the stakeholder partners. And in addition to that, actually NAS, DOT, Department of Transportation, Escambia County, City of Pensacola, The Northwest Florida Water Management District is a partner. The Department of Environmental Protection, the EPA, we're all partners. There's 27 partners that are involved in creating this BMAP. So what we do is we all get together, and the county, for instance, Escambia County gets together and they say, okay, here's what we've done in the last 20, 30 years to increase water quality in Bayou Chico. We've done a lot of stormwater drain issues. We have some real issues coming down the tributaries from stormwater runoff. There wasn't a lot of retention pond back in the 50s and 60s. You paved the parking lot, went in the creek, and you're done. Well, we can't do that. We don't do that anymore. So ECUA is one of the partners, and ECUA has diligently been working on taking houses off of septic tank and leaching fields that leak fecal coliform, and then they come down the creek and cause a problem for us. So they are also a partner, and they have done a tremendous amount of replacement of old septic tanks with sanitary sewer lines so that it goes to the treatment plant. They've also replaced a bunch of their lift stations. They had some old lift stations. We had one we called Old Stinky because it used to blow out, and when it blew out, we'd have 10,000 gallons of affluent coming out of the sewer system right into the creek and right into Bayou Chico, and then the health department shuts everything down, and it wasn't good. That one's been replaced. Several of them have been replaced with state-of-the-art, computer-controlled with cellular phones, and if something happens, they get notified immediately, and it has all kinds of backup systems and battery backups for loss of power and all kinds of things going on. So a lot of that work has been done. We estimate that between $50 and $60 million has been spent in the last 20 years on projects that are ongoing now and projects that have been completed that go to the three tributaries that feed Bayou Chico to get the stormwater runoff problem brought under some control. And there's other projects, some are ongoing right now and some are future ones that they want to do. Done a great job, the county's done a fabulous job of working on this over the years. Particularly, you have to understand budgets. All this stuff costs a lot of money. $50-60 million is a lot of money. And that's the city also. The city has done their part, and part of that money that was spent, the $50-60 million I'm talking about, was a portion of that was part of the city also. So there's been a lot of things, a lot of improvements that have been made in handling the water quality that's coming into Bayou Chico today. The only reason we are on the 303D list is for fecal coliform bacteria. And originally when we started the BMAP, we had all these excuses. They said, well, the dogs poop in the backyards and that runs into the bayou and that's the problem. And then they said the birds fly by and they poop in the bayou and that's the problem. That's where it's all coming from. Well, we had it tested to see what kind of fecal coliform it was, and it was pretty much 100% human fecal coliform. So obviously it was sewer. So once we realized that, then they also started equating what they call events, where the fecal coliform count in Bayou Chico would go off the charts. And they go, why did it just go off the charts? Was it a rain event? Was it something else? And then when we started overlaying like the ECUA blowouts of lift stations with the event dates, it was just amazing when all these different departments all started talking and laying this all out in the BMAP that you see, well, no wonder we went off the chart, because lift station number whatever blew out 10,000 gallons of affluent that day, and it went into Bayou Chico. So it was very interesting. It's been a very interesting exercise. And you identify what's called point source pollution, which is something like a lift station blowing out. But most of the problem comes from what we call a non-point source solution or pollution, and that what that is things we don't really know. It's kind of cumulative, a little bit from this guy's backyard, a little bit from the parking lot, a little bit from this, and it all adds up to not good. So those are the non-point sources. They're very hard to find. Point sources are easy. If you see a pipe that's green stuff's coming out of, you go, I bet that's polluting something.
The dredging, John, to the remediation, the restore Bayou Chico, will it involve just the navigation channels, or will it involve more of the bayou? And where will the spoils from the current thinking? Where will the spoils from the dredging go? Well, the dredging itself is a little bit complicated, because the idea is they use suction. Most likely they would use suction dredging, which is like a vacuum cleaner, and you would suck all the soft sediment until you got to hard sand, which is the white sugar sand, and then you take that sediment and dispose of it.
The depth varies from 6 inches to 24 feet, depending on where you are in the bayou. Not all of the depth problems are sediment. A lot of them are actually sand, which is fine and does not need to be removed for fecal coliform. However, it's blocking the flow and flushing, and that affects the quality of the water. So some of the sand has to come out that's filled in the tributaries in certain areas just to get water flow going. But mostly it's going to be sediment. Part of the problem with taking all the sediment out is, for instance, I have 3 marinas, and every one of them has 22 feet of sediment, one has 26 feet of sediment, and the other one has about 7 feet of sediment. Well, in Island Cove, my pilings are 35-foot pilings, and there's only about 20 feet in the sediment. If you took 24 feet of sediment out, what happens to the entire marina? It just falls in upon itself in a big pile of floating pilings. So obviously that would be an issue that we have to address. How much sediment do you take out? Do you just take the top 2 feet? Do you take, how do we address those kind of issues? Same with people's homes. They have boathouses out in the backyard. Same thing. If you took all the sediment away, the boathouse falls in. So what do we do about that? So probably we just take the upper layers of it out.
And the Clark sand pits, are they considered a part of the watershed, the Bayou Chico watershed?
It is, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
The Clark Sand Pit is part of the Bayou Chico watershed. What the Clark Sand Pit is just north of the Bayou Chico, up Jackson Creek. There's a sand pit. The sand pit, I think, was late 50s, early 60s. They started digging it. And what it is, what a borrow pit is they took the sand, and you buy the property, you take the sand, you get a permit, and you dig a hole in the ground, you take the sand, and you use the sand. You sell the sand. Mm-hmm. Most of the sand in that Clark sand pit was gone into a lot of the concrete that I-10 was made with.
Amazing.
And also bridges. I mean, the sand pit's been closed for a long time. It was closed back, I think, in the 80s, maybe the 90s. They shut down, and so that was what it is. What a borrow pit is you keep digging it out. You mine the sand out, and then you use it for whatever purpose, selling it or for making concrete. Maybe you needed sand to backfill a lot or fill in a swimming pool or whatever they're going to use it for. They buy it by the dump truck load and truck it out of there. When they get deep with the pit, and that pit ended up about 45 feet deep, it would fill with rainwater a little bit, so they had pumps, and they'd pump it out into Bayou Chico, the rainwater, and keep it dry so they could keep digging. What happened with that particular pit is they started running out of sand. That pit has a clay lining to it, so they ran out of sand, started hitting clay and going, well, we're kind of pumping a dry well here. So they ended up selling some sand out of it for a while when it wasn't running very much, and then they ended up closing the pit down. The pit was bought by Escambia County, and I believe it was 1998 when they purchased it, and I might be mistaken. I don't have it in front of me, but that's about right. And they bought it from money from, the acronym is SWIM. I won't get into that, but that's where the money came from. And it was from the Northwest Florida Water Management District. Gave them approximately $500,000 to buy the property to Escambia County. And the reason they bought the property, or gave the county the money to buy the property, and the reason the county bought the property was to put dredged spoil material from Bayou Chico in the property. And so that's why the land was bought by the county. The land does belong to the county, so they can do whatever they want to do with it at the end of the day. However, that's the purpose it was bought. And in 2008, when we dredged the channel, the Army Corps of Engineers dredged, they pumped 140,000 cubic yards of sediment into the Clark Sand Pit. During the process of getting the permit to do that, People's Water filed a lawsuit against the county, or against actually DEP, to stop them from getting the permit because they said that it would affect their aquifer for well, I don't remember, it was well 22 or something, I don't remember the well number now, but they had a People's Water well up there. And it went through a process and delayed the dredging from 2005, and we didn't what happened was it delayed the permitting 2 years. By the time we got the permit, we lost our funding, so we had to go to Congress and get refunded, and by the time we got our funding, we didn't get it completed until 2008. But during that process, they had the engineers out there and put a bunch of test wells in to see what the impacts would be from putting the dredge material up there as far as getting out of the sand pit or doing anything. And then they tested the well and found out that there's no possible way for anything from the sand pits to get into the well's aquifer because it's a layer of clay. And also the aquifer was a natural artesian aquifer, which means it has a positive pressure. So not only would you have to get through the clay, you'd also have to overcome the water pressure on the other side of the clay. So there was no possible way for any of the water from the Clark Sandpit Lakes to get into the aquifer, so they lost the lawsuit. We got the permit, and it was done. The area of the Clark Sand Pits, since the sediment was put up there in 2008, have been monitored this entire time, and there's never been any adverse effects from that sediment in the sand pit.
Now, John, you had mentioned to me before we started today about a pollution site on one of those lakes up there.
Yes.
What was that all about?
It's called the Omniverse Property, and it's 6 inches on the north side of the North Lake. We call them lakes. They're borrow pits that are full of water, and they're more like ponds. They're not real big, but they're a couple of acres. They're not real small either. But the Omniverse Property is on the shores of one of them, and the Omniverse Property. The story is, and I wasn't there, so I can't say for sure, but the story was that chemicals from the Reichold Chemical Plant were given to another chemical disposal company to dispose of. And rather than them disposing of them the right way, they took them up to the property and, what I heard, 35-gallon drums on the back of trailers and just tipped them over and dumped them in the land up there on that 6 acres of property on the north shore of that lake. What happened was when the EPA found out, they tried to sue. The companies that handled the material had so many shell companies that they could not find a responsible party and could not get remediation from the legal means and find someone to pay for remediating the land. So they put a chain link fence around the whole property, and there's big signs up there with the crossbones and skull and danger, danger, don't go onto the property. And exact composition of those chemicals I don't have in front of me either.
So the mapping has been done for Bayou Chico to identify where the sediments are, is what I understand.
Yes.
The Bayou Chico Association, what is its position about now pushing forward with removing these sediments and disposing of the spoils?
Well, obviously we're in favor of the project, and we've been working with the county. Original lead on this project was the Northwest Florida Water Management District. And Ron Bartels worked there, and he was a gentleman who was spearheading this whole thing for years and years and years. Well, he finally retired. And when he retired, the gentleman who took over for him was like, I got a full plate. I don't really have time to deal with this thing. Why don't we see if Escambia County would like to take the project over from us? So to our delight, the county decided that they would take over the project. We were very happy about that because we were afraid it was just going to die. And Escambia County has taken over it and taken the ball and run with it, and they've done a great job to this point on working towards getting this resolved. We have $12.6 million allotted for the actual dredging portion of it. We got the money, about $640,000 the county already has for the engineering and permit process that's going on. So, where we are now is we want to. The county has interviewed and hired an engineering firm, a very reputable, worldwide firm called AECOM or AECOM, depending on how you want to pronounce it. But they've been awarded the contract to start on the engineering, and they are going to go ahead and do the sediment testing to find out what other things might be in the sediment other than the bacteria. The thing that people need to understand about fecal coliform bacteria suspended in the sediment, one of the things people have said is, well, you pumped 140,000 cubic yards of the sediment up to the Clark sand pits, and Jackson Creek runs right through the middle of the sand pits, and it'll just go right back into Bayou Chico. But the way bacteria works is it's a living organism. So when you dry out the material, in other words, you pump the dirt in a slurry form and it dries out, it then becomes inert. It kills, the bacteria dies. So once it's exposed to being dried out, you have a bunch of dirt with dead bacteria in it, cannot be reconstituted. It's not Frankenstein bacteria. You can't make it come back to life. It's dead, it's done, it's fertilizer. So now you've got, 140,000 cubic yards of dirt that was put up there in 2008 that is completely inert, other than there were some PCBs and some copper and some other things in there at some level that were traceable in small areas. But now that it's been all mixed up with 140,000 cubic yards, I would venture you couldn't find it anymore. And that's the old thing that environmentalists always hate to hear is the solution to pollution is dilution. That's just one of those things that it sits up there. But the idea that you have 140,000 cubic yards, which is a small, maybe a big hill, small mountain of dirt, and you've got some, a cup of lead over here and a gallon of PCB over here, and mixed in that, how does that get back into Bayou Chico? It's a pile of dirt. So how do you get that out of the dirt and run it back down into the bayou, which is where it came from in the first place, and which is worse? So in an ideal world, you wouldn't necessarily do that. You might say, well, let's process it all and mine every bit of copper that's in there out and separate it out. But if you've ever watched any of the gold mining shows on TV, you know how hard they work just to get a little thing of gold out of a mountain of dirt, and that's kind of where you're at by the time you mix it all up and dump it in a big pile. The other issue up there is there's a railroad track that runs just south of Jackson Street on the north border of the Clark Sand Pit. The pit, there's a big hill that comes down. That hill has never been stabilized and has been eroding from rain over the years to the point where it's getting closer and closer to the railroad tracks. And soon, in a matter of a few years, the railroad tracks are in danger of falling into the Clark Sand Pit. An engineering study was done 4 or 5 years ago, I believe, and they came up with they needed 1 million cubic yards of dirt to stabilize that hill. So in our answer is we got a permit before to put the material in the Clark Sand Pit. We did it in 2008. That was 11 years ago. We've been testing it ever since then. We've never had any ill effects from putting the dirt up there. The bacteria died. We need to put about 2 million cubic yards up there to do the entire bayou. You need 1 million cubic yards of dirt to stabilize a railroad track hill. Why don't we pump it up there, dry it out, let the bacteria die, and then take that dirt, reinforce the railroad track hill, plant grass seed, and maybe someday put a park up there, do whatever you're going to do. And the Bayou Chico Association really doesn't care what we do with the sediment. We have no interest in, we don't want it, we don't care what you do with it, it doesn't matter. On our calculator, which will have a much better calculator when real professional engineers do this, not just a bunch of homeowners and business owners guessing at it, but by our calculator, to dredge it and put the material up in the Clark Sand Pit is going to be somewhere between $40 and $60 million project. If we have to process it, so the ideal answer to that is, well, what about any other thing other than the fecal coliform, which is the main reason we're on the 303D list, is the fecal coliform. We're going to get all that taken care of, and that'll be dried out. It'll become inert. It's not a pollutant problem moving forward. It can't come back because it's dead. It doesn't matter. So the issue is things coming back from the Clark Sand Pit would be the heavy metals and PCBs and other pollutants that are mixed into the sediment in some various form, depending on where you are. Different concentrations in different areas, from nothing to So what do we do with that? So the ideal solution has been thrown out that we set up a processing plant and we dewater the sediment in the processing plant. There's different ones that do it. There's some that are like a squeegee, 2 belts. You run the dirt through it and it squeezes the water out, and then you run the water through a series of large 30, 40-foot towers with carbon and sand and different things, and you go through a series of filtering the water out and then put the water back in the bayou after it's perfectly clean, and then you take the sediment out of those towers and you process that. And one of the other ones is a centrifugal, spins like your washer machine, spins the water right out of it, and then you take the water and you run that through the plant and process. The largest one that we know of in the state of Florida was down in South Florida, and they were very proud to let us know that they got that down to $148 a cubic yard to process the material. That's not to take it to the dump or take it to the landfill or dredge, none of that. Just to process it through a plant is $148 a cubic yard. We have 2 million cubic yards. You do the math. We're at $300 million just to process the dirt. Then you got to put it in a dump truck. You're looking at, 2 million cubic yards. A dump truck is 12 to 18 cubic yards per truck. You're looking at, 100,000, 120,000 trucks to haul it somewhere. And then if you take it to a landfill, you got to pay a tipping fee. That's about $35 a cubic yard. So that's another 70 million bucks. So plus the trucking, which is, you're talking about, our estimates are as high as a $500 million project. So if we can't put the sediment into the sand pit, then we don't believe there's an inexpensive enough method to dispose of the material, and the project will probably not get funded and wouldn't happen.
So the public policy choices appear to be not whether you dredge or not, but it's
Right.
how to dispose of the spoils. And
Right.
what I hear from you representing Bayou Chico Association is that putting the spoils directly into the Clark sand pits per the original purchase and the permitting that's in place would be a far less cost than processing it and shipping it to an EPA certified landfill somewhere. And the likelihood of getting the money to do the shipping it out of state would be so great that the chances that it would never get funded is that a pretty good summation?
Yes, that's a good summation. And I think, again, you have to understand that the association members, although we do have some members that are dredge experts, it's what they do for a living. I've personally dredged. I've personally operated the equipment that has dredged in Bayou Chico. Not the cutter head one you saw, but other ones. So, we're not experts. So if the engineers that have been hired by the county come up and say, no, this is what we're going to do, this is how we'll do it, and this is what it's going to cost, that's their job to do. We're not going to, and we're fine with whatever they do with the material. We don't want it to go to the Clark sand pit. We think it's a great place to put it. It's nice, rich, fertile soil. You can use it for topsoil. You can plant grass. You can make a park. The water up there is a different issue. It's quite polluted, and that would have to be remediated. I don't know what the cost would be on that, but they're pretty lakes. They're nice piece of property. I think it's 56 acres. It's a nice, could be a great park. We have no problem. We think it'd be a great use of it. We just don't want you to build the park until we finish the restoration of Bayou Chico, which is ongoing.
So you think there could be a future for mixed use of these borrow pits up there? Dredge spoils, recreation, conservation?
I think once we do the dredge of Bayou Chico, like I said, grade it out, plant some grass seed, and start mowing the lawn and let the kids play on it. It's fine. There's some other issues with the health department and the water quality up there.
What is the water quality? Can you swim in there? Would
absolutely
you swim
not.
in there?
Absolutely not.
Uh-huh.
Not right now. Now that's not to say it can't be remediated. I just don't know what the cost of the remediation would be.
Who monitors the water quality? What documentation do we
the health department in the county did. It's been about 2 years now, and you can find it online. Escambia, type in Bayou Chico, and it'll get you to the right stuff, and it'll tell
pretty
you.
Good website, actually.
It tells you all the chemicals that are in it, and if you look at it, there were 3 that were particularly caused cancer, problem in children, development, and a bunch of other things. And then there's also a letter from the health department that. Rather scathing letter that said you can't let anybody swim in that body of water. It has a chain link fence around it with barbed wire on top. So you're not supposed to go on the property. It's private county property. It's fenced off. The kids go under and through there, and it's not that hard to get in there. And they do swim in the lake, and I certainly wouldn't let my kids.
John, look, we could talk here for another hour or so. We're getting into happy hour and talk even more, but you've helped us understand a little bit more about the Clark sand pits, what we call up there the hidden lakes, and how they contribute to the health and future health of Bayou Chico, which is the mission of your organization. If a citizen would like to join the Bayou Chico Association, how would they do that? How do they participate?
We meet the second Wednesday of every month at 4:30 in the afternoon at Island Cove Marina on Bayou Chico, and that's 806 Lakewood Road. Also, if you'd like to send me an email, my email address is naybor, Naybor, at bellsouth.net, and I'd be happy to send you any information we can. We also do have a website. Just Google Bayou Chico Association, and you should find us.
John Nabor, the president of the Bayou Chico Association, spending time with us and Florida's most engaged citizens at ECW Live. Thank you, John. We appreciate you coming down, and thank all of you for with this compelling story about the future of Bayou Chico and how the county and the private organizations are all working together. Thank you once again, and join us on the next time we take you down to the hidden lakes, the restoration of Bayou Chico.